The Tesla Model 3 has been dubbed the mass-market electric car, with a starting price of just $35,000, and at the time of making this video, Tesla just announced that we would be receiving that price tag, almost 3 years after it was initially promised. For comparison, ideally, the Model 3 is trying to do to the electric car industry what the Boeing 747 did to the commercial aviation industry in the 70s, make it cheap and accessible to all, and it's wildly heralded as paving the way for an electric car future. Many people believe that it has influenced the major car manufacturers of the likes of Volkswagen and Ford to rethink their strategy and invest in electric cars in the coming years. It's even causing major pains to the already strong EV and hybrid force of Toyota by accounting for over 50% of its North American defection rate. But with all that said, it's not necessarily leading the way and becoming the electric car that everyone has. When we normally think of popular electric cars, 3 may come to mind: the Chevy Bolt, Nissan Leaf, and the Tesla Model 3. And typically, you'd expect to find them in countries like the US, Norway, or the Netherlands. But last year, those countries only accounted for 475,000 EV sales, less than half of the world's leader in electric car sales.
China backed by going electric.
Chinese market.
Look at these numbers.
The electric car industry.
The electric vehicle will be sold about 1.8 million or even more.
In 2018, China accounted for 1 million passenger electric car sales, which was 3 times the closest market of the US, and that's due to a major shift in the Chinese auto market. In a year where total car sales were down for the first time in more than a decade, the electric car market grew by 55% from the previous year. This major change was spearheaded by quite a few companies such as BYD, Beijing Electric Vehicle Corp, and the state-owned company of Shanghai Automotive, more formerly known as SIAC. They are producing electric vehicles like the EC series, Geely Jidao, and BYD Song DM. The underlying trend of the rise in popularity of these electric cars is how cheap and affordable they are. In a country where the median income is just $2,700, affordability plays a huge role in the sales of these electric vehicles. Take for example the Beijing Electric EC series, which is a compact hatchback and was the most popular electric car in 2018, clocking around 150,000 sales, as a starting price of about $23,000, which is $7,000 less than the Nissan Leaf, $12,000 less than the Model 3, and $13,000 less than the Chevy Bolt. It achieves this in a few different ways. First of all, its battery is small, like really small. At only 22 kilowatt hours, the car has a range of just 160 to 200 kilometers. But about 60% of China's population lives in very densely populated urban areas where most of the cars are being sold, meaning that its range isn't a huge drawback. And this is important because every kilowatt hour in a battery costs around $200, but making the size of the battery pack about a third of the Tesla Model 3's, somewhere in the range of $9,000 to $11,000 is shaved off the price of the car. Another big factor in the price savings is the manufacturing. China is a powerhouse when it comes to being able to mass-produce goods at low prices, and the same goes for cars. Cheaper labor and more efficient manufacturing techniques help to keep costs down, while the 3 more well-known mass-market electric cars mentioned earlier are all manufactured in the US, where it is more expensive to operate. The EC series, along with the D2 and Song DM, are all built in China. Although, to be fair to the Tesla Model 3 and its competitors, target market and site location do go hand in hand, especially when talking about cars, because of the huge import tariffs placed on them. This is why Tesla has just broken ground on a gigafactory in China, which is already one of Tesla's biggest markets. Now their cars will no longer have to be imported and face the huge tariffs. But perhaps the biggest reason in lowering the prices and driving the popularity of electric cars in China are incentives. That $22,000 price tag of the EC series I had mentioned earlier falls to just $9,000 after incentives are applied, making the EV a very appealing car to buy. Not to mention, purchasing an electric vehicle increases your chances of winning a license for it from a license lottery or auction, a scheme 12 Chinese cities use to keep the number of cars, primarily internal combustion engine vehicles, off the road. For example, in Beijing, which started the trend in 2008 after the Olympics, the chances of receiving a license for a petrol car are about 1 in 2,000 because of the 2.3 million applicants for the scarce supply of 40,000 licenses a year, while for electric cars, the chances are closer to 1 in 5 for the 60,000 licenses up for grabs. Shanghai also also does something similar to where the licenses are auctioned off with a typical winning price of $14,000. However, electric cars get around this. A license for one in Shanghai is not only easier to get, it's also free. In fact, 6 of the Chinese cities that use lottery or auction-like systems for granting license plates account for almost half of all EV sales in China, which is around 18% of the entire world's plug-in market. The huge incentives came around to prominence 1 decade ago in 2009. At the time, China had just become the world's leader in car production, but still lagged behind other major countries in terms of technological development. The country also had a rising pollution problem and needed a solution. The electric car industry, which was still small at the time, offered a fix to China's woes. It could essentially leapfrog other countries technologically while also bringing down automotive emissions. So pilot incentive programs were launched, offering 60,000 yuan towards electric cars and 50,000 towards plug-in hybrids in 5 different cities for 2 years. Other programs, such as 10 Cities, 1,000 Vehicles initiative, emerged afterwards, and later, with the pilot programs complete, incentives were increased, expanded, billions of dollars were invested in research and development, and nationwide charging networks and infrastructure were implemented. None of this would be effective, though, if it weren't for any companies building electric cars. To encourage the production of electric cars, the government of China has been implementing sales targets for major car manufacturers, essentially forcing them to build electric cars or face fines. This year, 2019, car manufacturers will receive multiple credits for each EV built. Each company must have credits equivalent to 10% of all its car sales for the year, or will have to buy them from other companies. The Chinese government really is all in on EVs, and it has good reasons to be. Aside from technological superiority and pollution concerns mentioned earlier, China, the country that imports the most oil in the world, wants to lessen its dependence on the oil-producing countries it buys from. Oil prices fluctuate a lot, and that can impact a country's economy, although more importantly, the effects on national security that come with importing huge amounts of oil. And China, slowly becoming the world's biggest superpower, certainly wouldn't want to risk anything. And luckily, its plans and policies seem to have worked out so far by becoming the world's biggest electric car market in just a few years. Now, thank you all for watching. I surely hope you learned something today, and I hope you enjoyed the longer video. Also, a bit of announcement, I'm planning on starting a sort of geography-based series that should hopefully be a bit easier and quicker to make. But don't worry, if you still like these videos, I'll still always be working on them. One other thing, I would have liked to go into more detail about the incentives and pressures on China, but I wanted to keep the video under 10 minutes, so if you would like to read more, I've included multiple sources and some research papers on the subject. Just note, these really only covered the later half of the video because I hadn't kept track of links when I first got the idea. Sorry about that. Anyway, as always, if you have any videos, ideas, suggestions, or tips, my email is on the screen, should be mindlearningpro@gmail.com, and as always, I'll see you hopefully very, very soon.